Hello and welcome to another episode of Zone In with Akese. Today we continue our conversation with Paul Akasanza, who shares his story on how he grew up as a pastor's son. Let's listen to the continuation.
When you did wrong or when you were confused about something, did you feel like you had someone in there to talk to? Someone who was mature enough or who would understand you, etc., etc. How did you handle?
When I look back, I think that part, that need to have coaches or mentors or people to guide the young people who were my age, in the teens, mid-teens to early 20s, and maybe even older than that, was missing. You went to children's church till you were 12 or 13, then you got dumped into the big people's church, basically.
Yes.
And then you had to start doing the things that everybody else was doing, and basically you started following practices, stand up to pray, and then you were,
give a testimony, etc.
And encouraged, you were encouraged to do it. Yeah, even when you didn't want to do it. Now, coming back to answering your question, we didn't have that. I would have loved to have some, and when I look at churches today, I think that there's some churches that have figured that out a little bit, where they have youth groups and those types of things. And a lot of those youth groups are led by other youth,
Yes.
who have either just recently gone through it or experiencing, and are helping the kids feel comfortable to understand what it's like to be in that environment. And I think that should have been the way that, that we when we were growing up, what we would have gone through. But I think that there's definitely an opportunity there for young people to have access to other people who are either in it or experiencing and can feel comfortable talking to people and sharing their experiences with.
If I should be going through something, I would rather speak to someone who I think can relate to what I have seen firsthand, that when you get into the world, things are not the same. Like, you had to pack up your bags, go live in another continent, and realizing that, listen, this is not how we do things that way. We don't do things this way. So you had to reorient yourself. You had to teach yourself again, and then start a certain type of life. For me, it's more the solutions available and who the channel through which the solution is coming from.
Yeah.
For me,
Totally, I agree with you. And just exactly, it wasn't so much a high end side. It was more like, you know what I mean? It was because you got into it. I got into it with a certain mindset that, this is the way I used to do. So if I do it this way, this will happen. Yeah, no, the circumstances were very different, And and I remember, actually, I'll give you a very specific example. I remember I would have been in probably about 16, 17 maybe, and there was this girl in my neighborhood that I really liked. And so, and growing up, I know. I mean, that's dangerous ground back then when I was growing up. So, I remember talking to certain people who I thought I could actually connect with, and saying, "This is how I'm feeling, and this is how and I think she likes me, and I think, and I felt like I just wanted to let it out and let somebody know." Well, wouldn't you know that the next day, my dad called me and said, "So, I hear," and I felt so betrayed by that experience that I did not tell anybody else again what was going on in my personal life. Do you know what I mean? So the difference there being that it's one thing to have the people that you can say you want to encourage young people to connect with, but there's got to be some trust. There's got to be some there's going to be some sort of a circle of trust that they can share what they're really going through, and we can be vulnerable with each other, and you can tell me, okay, well, you know what, hey, when I was your age, I did it this way and this is what happened. Maybe you should think about this or do that, and then keep it between us and help me grow. But if I feel like I can't tell you, because if I tell you, you're going to go tell it's not like I was breaking the law. It's different if I went and stole something and then you felt like you had to go and report it to the authorities. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about, as a young man growing up, experiencing different things or experiencing new things and reaching out to somebody in the church environment for support or help, and then getting that sort of a return. So that was definitely missed.
Okay.
But there's definitely a miss there as far as how do we equip the young people so that with the information that they have, with the experiences that they can have, so that when they get out there, wherever there is, in their work, in their schools, whatever it is, they can live the lives that they're growing up to live to the fullest, knowing that they're equipped with the right, the right information, with the right resources, all those types of things. And at the very least, that they know that they have the support somewhere that they can go back to if they need more help.
Okay. I want to know if at any point in time you felt like you were better than anybody because you were a pastor's son, and
Absolutely.
you will be hanging out with the cool kids at church, say all the pastor's children, i.e. we're the big boys, we roll with the big boys and that kind of thing. You can't sit with us because we're better than you. Yes, that kind of thing. I want to know if you were ever in that sex, and how did it feel like, and why, how did that happen? Like, talk to me about it.
You know what? That is so funny that you say that. I was just having a conversation with my son a few months ago, because he knows a couple of kids who are pastors' kids, right? And one of the comments that he makes, oh yeah, those guys are so full of themselves. Their dad is a pastor, so they think they got it all figured out, all those kind of things. And I said to him, like, look, I was there before. The truth is, you have no idea what it is growing up as a pastor's kid. I'm generalizing. Okay, so I'm sure there's some people out there who, because their dad is a pastor, they think that they're untouchable and they think that they're better than everybody. But in my case, growing up, I felt so judged. I mean, I felt like I lived under a microscope. There wasn't anything I could do. I mean, I would be driving in town. I mean, I remember driving from Abekala Pass to Legon to go visit a girl I was seeing. And by the time I came home, my parents already knew where I'd been because somebody saw me. And
by the minute, you're being reporting live on Paul Akasanza.
Exactly. I lived under a microscope. But, all jokes aside, what I would recommend and what I would suggest is people, yes, there's a perception that because your dad's the pastor, you feel like you're better than everybody else. But I would suggest, and this is me speaking on my own volition, so I don't know about other people. It actually was harder for me growing up. One, because I didn't want it. I didn't ask for it. Don't get me wrong. I love my dad. I love my parents, and I love the upbringing that they gave me. But there was a point in my life where I didn't want to be that person. But people were looking at me like that, right? And then people were thinking of me like that. I remember hearing stories later about things that people had said about me later on, and it to be honest, it cut me to think that there were people that I thought I knew who were my friends, who were close to me, and I found out things that they were saying about me, about how they thought, I was this and I did this and I was that and I thought I was this and stuff like that. So that surprised me. So I would say to people who think that, first of all, just put yourself in that person's shoes for once, right? It's their parent who's the pastor. It's their parent who's the church leader. It's not them. And then secondly, imagine what it's like for them living under a light of everybody in your business, literally. Everybody in your business. Everybody wanting to know what you're doing, what you're up to, where you're going, all those types of things, right? But that was hard. I actually just recently read, and if I can just get biblical on you for a second here, I actually just read a little article, and somebody was talking about how Christians today are so obsessed with John 3:16. If you're a Christian and you don't know what John 3:16 is, then you probably need to go back to school. But anyways, everybody knows what John 3:16 is, right? And what John 3:16 says. God so loved the world that he sent his son, that who believes in him should be saved. But nobody talks about John 3:17. You know, and what does John 3:17 say? It says that he came not to judge, right? But to save. I'm just paraphrasing, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, who we are as Christians and what we do, it's not so much about, you know, Jesus dying for us to save us, but it's also about him not judging us, right? So, and now that goes both ways. There's some people, and I would admit, there would be some people who think that because their dad is the pastor, they're better than everybody else. So they stand there in their ivory tower and they point their fingers and they tell you what they think you should be doing, stuff like that. I personally, I don't remember doing that. And of course, I'm sure somebody might remember differently. And if they remember me doing that, then I totally apologize for acting that way, because today, as I see life today, that would have been wrong. I mean, I would have had no place to do that, because I wasn't perfect. You remember me growing up. I had my own issues, right? And so who would I have been, right? Who would I have been to be pointing the finger at other people and telling them, you know, what they were doing wrong or anything like that? But the more important part is not judging people, right? But loving them and helping them, right? Helping them be what they need or what they've been created to be, helping them fulfill the purpose in which their life that they're supposed to be. So anyways, that's just my own little personal thing, but that was definitely a deep question, and you definitely touched a nerve there, because I remember growing up and going through so much of that.
I just want to know what made you do things you did. In hindsight, do you think it was rebellion? Do you think it was just you not knowing what to do, or you had a different interest, or did you just want to do something differently apart from what everybody expected you to do?
Absolutely. So this is definitely in hindsight. I didn't know this when I was growing up, but I look back to those days, and like you said, I think it had something to do with the fact that I wanted to be myself. Right? I'd been growing up from a young age of doing things because it was the way people were telling me to do it, and because it was the way people were expecting me to do it. But so here's this may be a funny example, but it's very true. You remember this growing up, you know, when it was church time, we would all wear our shirts and ties, and you know. I don't know. It was almost like a uniform. You had to wear a tie to go to church. Otherwise, you were not spiritual enough.
Yeah.
You were not wearing a tie. I hated wearing ties. Okay, I hated wearing neckties. I mean, let's face it. It would be so hot, right? I mean, growing up in Ghana, it would be so hot. And then you get in the taxi and you'd be sweating. I mean, by the time you get to church, your armpits were all sweaty. I mean, you had your handkerchief and you were wiping your head and stuff. And then meanwhile, you had to wear a tie. Okay. So the first chance I had, where I got to that point where I thought I could make a decision, the first thing I got rid of was a tie.
Okay.
I didn't want to wear a tie.
Interesting. Okay.
Right? And I made that decision because I'd gone to that point where I felt like, okay, I'm old enough to start making decisions for myself. As far as I'm concerned, this thing here is not something I want to do, right? So now, if you transfer that to all the other aspects of growing up in a Christian environment, there may be different things that you're being made to do, or asked to do, or forced to do because you're in the church, and you'd be doing it just because you're being told to do it. But the first opportunity you get, where you feel like you're growing up, you know, now you're 16, now you're 18, now you can start making decisions for yourself. Guess what's going to be the first thing to go, right?
Those things, yeah.
Yeah, and then the other aspect as well is, I think there was a little bit of me feeling like I'd missed out on the fun things in life, right? There's lots of people who get saved when they're a little bit older, so they've gone through a certain, you know, experiences and stuff like that. They've figured out the world for themselves, and then they get to a certain point and feel like, okay, and something happens. There's always somebody who has their own faith journey where something happens, and then they decide they're going to change, and then they decide to believe in God and accept Him and all these kind of things, and then they change their life around. But what is it like when you're born into it? Yeah. So it's not like you're going a certain way, going to change, right? So I think for me, I had a little bit of that where I started growing and I started getting exposed. I mean, I was going to school, I was meeting friends, I was, and seeing, wait a minute, I've never done that before.
Yes.
I've never done that before.
Yes, I did.
Okay, Yoko, let's go do it.
So it was just the excitement of doing something different. I haven't done it before, so let me go and do it. That kind of thing.
Don't forget to subscribe and follow me on Facebook and Instagram. See you next week for another exciting episode.